Alright, this one is a little more rough. Let's start wading in. We open with Jack in full outdoor getup as he casts a fishing line into the open ghost portal.
So,
Oh no, we already have a problem.
the portal is just open and he's just fine with that.
I guess he found out how it works since the last episode.
I guess.
Why is he opting to throw a fishing line in there instead of a drone? Surely he's made a drone that he could just send down into the in there and
No,
like
no.
record things and actually get
No,
some information.
no, 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 no. Fishing.
I guess. This isn't necessarily a problem, I would say, but it's incredibly strange that the previous episode showed us that Jack has no idea how the portal works and that ghosts have the ability to just open it and leave whenever they please. And now all of a sudden he has it open and seems to be operating it at least on a somewhat basic level of understanding at its functionality. Provided we also don't know how much time has passed at this point. The accident, as it's referred to, is still said to have only been a few months ago. This is a line that's said during Memory Blank, which is a whole season away.
A few months ago, I convinced you to go into this. You went in there. There was an accident.
On top of that, Mystery Meat establishes that at that point in the timeline, the accident was a month ago, so we can get a somewhat vague idea on what the timeline looks like here. While a few months isn't exactly a fully concrete piece of information to work with, we're still presumably working with under a year of having ghost powers, unless Sam just straight up lied to Danny for whatever reason. Following that string of logic, the events of parental bonding cannot have taken place more than a month following the events of Mystery Meat. Could Jack have figured out how to work the portal in that time? Sure, I don't see why not. But again, this is something that could have been nice to see. It wouldn't have even been a scene that took up much screen time even. Just have him walk over to a console and hit a button that opens the portal, followed by him laughing ecstatically and yelling, "It works." There we go. We've now established that Jack can operate the portal. It's not that big of a deal, it just kind of raises an eyebrow that they decide to just throw that tiny thing from Mystery Meat away. So Danny walks up and Jack explains that the ghost fishing rod thing is a special invention he made where the line is constructed of a special material that ghosts can't break. I don't really know why he would make that instead of sending a drone or something of that nature into the ghost zone instead, something that you could actually gather information from and record the contents of the zone from a safe distance. You know, or at least you think you know, how dangerous these things are, so what exactly were you planning on doing if you caught one, Jack? So Jack hands his 14-year-old son the fishing line that's thrown into a different dimension filled with dangerous creatures they don't understand as he rushes to the bathroom. Has the idea that ghosts are incredibly dangerous things, and he's just giving his 14-year-old son the fishing rod that he threw into the ghost zone as he leaves him by himself.
Yep. Also has a urinal installed in his house.
Yeah. That's... Well, actually, that tracks from how great of parents they're established to be in the last episode. At least we're staying consistent from that respect. Given that anything could just grab that line and potentially yank this child that, to their understanding, doesn't have any special abilities into the ghost zone to be lost forever, you would think that Jack would be a little more careful with, "Oh my god, a dragon? Good job, Jack. Your kid would have literally been eaten by a dragon if he didn't have superpowers. Good thing Jazz wasn't the one who came up and had the fishing pole shoved into her hands. That probably would have ended a little differently." So Danny transforms and he kicks the dragon across the room because I guess being a ghost gives you super strength or something. I'm sure there aren't any practical ways to utilize that to any capacity beyond kicking things.
Okay, so I want to point out that this has happened twice now. I didn't point out the last episode. I should have. He kicks large, thick objects, large creatures, and he sends them flying. His strength must be retardedly high.
He does lift a bus in a future episode, so I guess he has super strength? I guess?
I guess.
He never really uses it beyond that of kicking and that one time where he lifts a bus. But no, that episode is also like when the show started to like really go downhill because it's like it's out of nowhere. Just all of a sudden he's just like, oh, you can lift bus filled with children now. Okay, I guess. As he does this, the amulet hanging from the dragon's neck flies off and lands very conveniently into Danny's backpack. I will give you that it's a nice attention to detail that we saw Danny carrying the backpack downstairs prior to this. They could have easily just had the backpack there for no reason, which wouldn't really have been an issue, mind you. I'm sure there's probably multiple instances of Danny or Jazz bringing their belongings downstairs and leaving them there, be it intentional or not, but the fact that they show Danny bringing it down and throwing it to the ground shows a level of passion for the work. It's the tiny attention to details like that really showcases how much an artist really cares about their work. It's nice to see. However, it's still super convenient beyond measure that the amulet that flew off of the dragon's neck just happened to land in the one spot that was going to be taken by Danny. Especially considering the placement of where Danny tossed it down, as well as the fact that the dragon had only just exited the ghost portal on the other side of the room when Danny kicked it, and yet it still appeared to fly backwards several feet, but not that big of a deal, I suppose. The geography of the cartoon room isn't entirely matching up. If that's the worst flaw I can identify in this episode, then I'd say we're pretty good off. Spoiler alert, it's not. So upon losing the amulet, the dragon transforms into a pale young ghost girl, who informs Danny that she only wanted to go to a costume ball and that her mother wouldn't let her. She is then sucked back into the ghost zone and everything returns to normal just in time for Jack to return. Alright. So, we have a couple things to talk about here. It's very nice that the show is building up a certain mystery about the contents of the Ghost Zone. At this point, we've only seen what we can presume is a relatively modern times cafeteria worker, and now what appears to be a European princess from medieval times.
That none of the ghosts would be dead people.
Yeah, I'm sure. The show is obviously toying with the afterlife, and now we've seen two ghosts from two entirely different walks of life. It raises a couple questions that a lot of viewers may find enticing and interesting. We just saw a dragon come out of there. What else could possibly be in that place? What is it like in there? Is it just a chaotic purgatory, or is there some semblance of peace? The amulet the dragon was wearing had a supernatural effect on her. What other powerful artifacts could be in there? And who could have them? The Ghost Zone is currently a completely unknown entity. To the extent of our knowledge, anything can come out of it. This could create a sense of anxiety or anticipation in a lot of viewers and has the potential to pull in new viewers. This is probably one of the more better written aspects of the early stages of the show. Not that that's really saying much, as anyone can insert a mystery box into their story, but the lack of information and attention that the show gives to the Ghost Zone creates what I personally would say is a fairly intriguing setup. It all really depends on how they execute it in the coming episodes, but those shall be bridges we'll cross when we come to them. Second observation. It's interesting that the dragon girl here doesn't make a comment about the sudden absence of her amulet. Not to say that's a bad thing, but there's a lot of things that can be inferred from it. The fact that she doesn't attribute her not being a giant fire-breathing lizard anymore to her lost amulet implies that she's unaware of the properties that it has. We're shown that the wearer isn't entirely conscious of their actions when they're in dragon form, so it's entirely possible that she figured she lost the necklace during the blackout that occurs after transformation. To that degree, this makes sense, because if she were aware of the amulet's abilities, she absolutely would have noticed its disappearance immediately after transforming back. I know this is contradicted later, but we're not talking about that episode quite yet. We'll take the bad as it comes, but in the interest of being fair, let's stick to how things are currently standing in the narrative. It's entirely possible that Dragon Girl was too hung up on not being able to go to her party thing and didn't notice her missing amulet until after she was sucked back into the Ghost Zone. This could explain her appearance at the end of the episode, as she had returned to look for it. However, I'll admit, this is all speculation. None of this information is given to us, and Dragon Girl's presence in the episode is purely a plot device. I don't actually think the writers put that much thought into her character, as it's not the important part of the story. Which is fine. Every character in fiction doesn't have to be Joker levels of in-depth, but with the information we can infer from her character as it stands, if they were to, I don't know, eventually make an episode where they try to expand her character at all, they would have to make sure they abide by what they've established with her and her amulet so far. If they were to openly contradict the rules they set up about the amulet, as well as how filled in Dragon Girl is about those rules, then yeah, that would be pretty dumb. I'm sure that won't happen though. I'm sure I'll never have to bring this character up again. After the opening, we cut to the next day where we learn about a school dance that is apparently coming up at Casper High because narrative parallels. Tucker asks a bunch of girls out and they all say no, and he gets mad about it. In contrast, Sam is mad because no one has asked her out to it. Can't imagine why. But she somehow manages to convince Danny and Tucker that she doesn't actually care about going. Despite having the subtlety of a dying walrus, Sam's lines are either believed or disregarded as Danny and Tucker are promptly distracted by the introduction of our new character. We see Paulina, the attractive, popular high school girl. We get the everyone staring after her in longing cliche before Sam once again kickstarts the plot. After seeing Danny and Tucker ogling her, Sam scoffs and says that girls like her are a dime a dozen. As you can imagine, Danny and Tucker aren't fazed in the slightest by this, and Sam goes on to say that looks aren't everything and that you can't judge a book by its cover, which is, I mean, Sam, you literally know nothing about this person.
Also, I want to point out that she says she's dime a dozen. Like, I literally just watched 4 girls walk out of the school and none of them are drawn as attractively as she is, so I think you're just like, yeah. You don't even know what she's like. I don't think that Sam also really know what she's like anyway. For all she knows that she's, it's just typical girls not liking each other. Mm-hmm. High school bullshit, you know. That's literally what this part is.
Well, I don't think we actually find out how well they knew Paulina at this point. I think it's just one of those things where it's like, oh, she's just here. So I think that this point where Danny goes up and talks to her is the first time that they actually have ever interacted, which kind of leads me to believe that her and Sam have never interacted. Which, yeah. So in that case, the only way that Sam would be able to come to that conclusion would be from the hearsay of others.
Probably.
Which, yeah, high school, so not like that's all too surprising.
The thing is there isn't even anything wrong with this narratively speaking, because this is pretty much just typical high school girls hating other high school girls for no reason. We don't know if Paulina is a new transfer or if she's been at the school for a long time, but it's implied that none of these 3 have interacted with her at all up until this point. Sam is just continuing to be a completely and utterly unlikable and insufferable human being for no reason. You may think that's a bit of an exaggeration, and I'm just further demonizing her based on loose evidence, given that all she said was that you can't judge someone based on their looks. And if that were all that Sam had done, I would agree with you. I would be a little excessive in my claims. But she also does this.
Kudos, Danny. You just set an all-time speed record for drowning in the shallow end of the gene pool.
Wow, Sam. Wow. If the 2 of you even met each other, you don't know anything about Paulina at this point other than everyone's attracted to her. She has literally done nothing and you've come up and attacked her for no reason. For all you know, she's depressed and insecure and you just destroyed any semblance of confidence she could have had. For someone who totes to not judge a book by its cover, you are judging that book pretty damn hard by its cover. What the hell, Sam? What the hell? I remember you being a likable character when I was a kid. What's more, despite the fact that Danny embarrassed himself in front of her, Paulina was actually responding somewhat positively to him still. Her initial go-away attitude lifted a little bit, and she began flirting with him with her tipping of the hat line.
The thing is Danny actually seemed like he was getting somewhere almost, because Paulina was like kind of responding to him positively, and then Sam just decided to come up and be a bitch about it.
Yeah, also, she's like, you're shallow. It's like, based on what standard are you saying she's shallow?
Like,
she says, I don't want to date this person who came up to me. Yeah, I don't want to go to the dance with you. I don't know. I don't know you. You're being kind of weird right now, so I don't want it. You're shallow. No. That's not. Granted, I love her insult. Her insult's fantastic, but
yes, Sam just kind of came up and just said that, and there was nothing. Paulina didn't actually even do anything. If anything, she was being fairly inoffensive, other than the whole, like, oh, please don't tell me you've suddenly fallen for me. Like, that'd be the only thing that I could, if I had to pick something and be like, okay, yeah, that's kind of bitchy, but like,
he didn't do anything.
Yeah, other than that, it's pretty inoffensive. So like. It's obvious that it's the whole, oh, Sam is just, like, jealous and all that, which is obviously what they're going for, but, like, they just do not know how to portray Sam in a way, like, in the beginning of the show, they just did not know how to portray Sam in a way that wasn't bitchy and overbearing.
So if Sam hadn't decided to step in and be overly insensitive and cruel, would Paulina have actually said yes to him? Of course not, because they go ahead and make Paulina the villain after this, so Sam doesn't look bad. Quite the roll of the dice you took there, Sam. Almost like you read the script or something. Popularity and physique have little to no bearing on one's mental well-being, and Sam certainly wouldn't have looked as righteous had Paulina run off crying instead of evilly plotting to steal Danny away from her. Good thing we have the writers to keep Sam on the correct side of the morality spectrum, even though she is clearly the one in the wrong in this situation. Unless she had some information about Paulina that nobody else did and she's just not sharing it with us for some reason, she is just straight up judging someone based on their looks, after immediately saying that you can't judge someone based on their looks. And it wouldn't have even been as bad had it not been for the fact that the show is treating it like she's in the right. What a great message to send young developing teenagers. Attractive people are evil. I wonder if that thought crossed their mind at all during production.
Looks aren't everything. It's like, true, looks aren't everything, but you're being really mean to this person because they're pretty.
Yeah, Paulina hasn't done anything to you at this point. She hasn't even done anything to Danny. Like, you are basing this entirely off of
Jealousy.
Yeah. This is... Ooh. Sam is not doing too good in the whole being likable department. Like,
yeah, she's just being kind of a bitch. But it's not because I don't mind her, but still, it's just the facts right now.
So in true idiotic teenager form, Paulina decides that the best way to get back at Sam for insulting her is to severely go out of her way to pretend to like Danny so that Sam will get jealous about it, even though she doesn't actually know if Danny and Sam are together, and in fact has more reason to think that they're not because he came up and asked her out, but whatever. It's not like Paulina here ever really emanated intelligence throughout the series. Or basic levels of sentience, for that matter.
They have to make Paulina the more morally reprehensible one now so that Sam looks good in comparison.
Yep, which is really... the thing is, like, also, like, nothing bad really happened to this here. This whole thing is just literally now, oh, wow, because that goth person insulted me, I'm going to use this guy that she isn't dating but could be dating, but not really, but they're friends, so I'm just going to be a bitch for no reason. What is she really gaining out of this besides smug satisfaction at this point?
I mean, isn't the smug satisfaction enough for most of these idiots?
I guess, but that's pretty weak motivation there.
But that's neither here nor there. Let's see how she enacts her plan. The next scene, which contains this, is pivotal to not only the plot of this episode, but for every following episode in the series, as we discover a severely powerful new ability that Danny has. Paulina approaches Danny and begins talking to him, but before our conversation can actually get started, Dash shoves him into his locker so that he can talk to her instead. It's interesting to note that it is treated as though this is the first time Dash has spoken to her. As Paulina is in the same basic social circle that Dash is in, it's a bit odd that the two of them are not already acquainted. The only fallback defense I could see about this would be that Paulina is a recent transfer to Casper High, but obviously this is never something that is mentioned. If that were the case, though, it would make more sense that she, Danny, Sam, and Dash hadn't met or otherwise interacted with each other at all up until this point. Normally, I wouldn't really find this to be a major deal, but the major piece of this puzzle is that Paulina is visibly put off and annoyed by Dash's presence. True, it could be part of her show since she's going after Danny at the moment, but considering what Danny does next, which we will talk about, don't you worry, it ensures that Paulina will have a rather poor first impression and overall opinion of him. Sounds fair, right? So why is she hanging out with him in every single episode after this?
Wouldn't Paulina and Dash already know each other at this point? Unless Paulina is actually new to the school or something, which they don't actually say.
Well, it seems like everybody knows her because everyone's like, oh, it's Paulina, and everybody says her name, everybody knows her, she's attractive, yada yada. You'd think so. Granted, they could also be in different classes. One of them could be a year behind or ahead. But notice how even when Dash was talking to her, she's immediately, her first reaction is, ew, this guy is retarded. She's just giving him this look of, I don't want to deal with you.
Ladies, I know this is hard to believe, but I'm single.
Next, we have Danny's new power, which is possession, but we're calling it overshadowing because it sounds less scary, I guess. He discovers that he can do this by weirdly putting his hands into Dash's back while intangible. Not really sure what he was planning there, to be honest, but whatever, we have the revelation now. Now, there are a couple rules that are important to note about the overshadowing ability. The possessed person does not remember the actions that Danny takes while he is possessing them. However, they are apparently susceptible to ideas and thoughts that Danny has during.
Oh, then you should get to know Danny Fenton. He doesn't scrub his mom's feet every night like I do. Why do I suddenly feel like scrubbing my mom's feet?
Now, see, that's interesting because that means but based on what Dash just said means that if whatever Danny is thinking or says when he's possessing somebody could be influenced into their actual mind. That's what that's implying. Is that used again? No, but it's interesting.
Yeah, that is. It's because they don't. Well, sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. But for the most part, people don't actually remember when Danny overshadows them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, that is interesting. I wish they would have done that again, actually.
Also, Danny still has his voice when he's in someone else's body, which makes no sense whatsoever. This is always something that bothers me when a possession or body swap concept is introduced in a cartoon. Vocal cords are not a mindset that people have based on their thoughts and feelings. They are very much physical. Dash should still sound like himself, and Paulina should be wondering why the hell he started sounding like Danny. This is basic biology. Yeah, I know the reason it's like that is so that people don't get confused. After all, this show has such little confidence in its viewers that it has a line to explain why ghost shields don't work on humans. But the sudden green eyes and Dash saying,
"In Dash's body?"
should have been plenty of a giveaway of what's actually going on. They weren't exactly subtle about it. I think they could have survived by making the scene make sense. This all leads up to Paulina letting Danny out of the locker, where he falls down and the dragon amulet tumbles out of his backpack. The hell is this nonsense? It has been almost 2 days since that thing has fallen into Danny's backpack. We know this because it fell in there after Danny threw it on the ground in the lab.
I threw it on the ground!
In the most likely of scenarios, this is because he had just gotten home from school. This means that the initial conversation with Paulina must have happened the next day. And then, in this scene, he makes a comment about how he blew it with her the day before. That means this thing has been sitting in his backpack overnight, twice, and Danny just never noticed it or didn't feel the need to take it out and see what it is. Does he even use the books that are in his backpack? Does he ever take things out or put them back in? What's the point of it if you aren't going to use it? Also, if we're going to ignore the fact that he just never noticed it, why is he not even the least bit curious on how it got there? I know he's all happy because he got the date with the pretty girl and all that, but come on, man. How is your first thought that the necklace belongs to your mom and sister? That doesn't even in the slightest explain how it got into your backpack. Of course, Paulina sees it and gets all googly-eyed over it, so Danny gives it to her. She agrees to go to the dance with him and puts it on, immediately causing her eyes to light up. So, yeah, wonderful. We've set the stakes for the episode. Danny is all excited about it and his pants fall down again. I kind of went over it earlier, but this is part of Danny's powers still not being completely under his control. The intangibility still seems to be a subconscious reaction of sorts, which, as I noted in the last episode, is actually quite great. Danny still sucks, but he isn't randomly losing his transformation between his two forms anymore. We're seeing progression. He's slowly getting better, and this is very good. It shows dedication, and we're subtly being told that there's a bit more to the overall progression of events that occur in this show. A very small one, but it is in fact there. Mr. Lancer catches Danny and reprimands him for losing his pants before telling him that he wants to speak to his father for a parent-teacher conference. It was always interesting to me that he only wanted to talk to Jack and not Maddie as well. I was always under the impression that parent-teacher conferences usually involved both parents, but I suppose it's not too far-fetched to say that Lancer only needed to speak to one of them. Little convenient, because Danny can use his new power to get out of it. Plus, from what I can gather on the conference, Lancer mainly wanted to address Danny's need for a belt, which I'm not really sure why he needed to call Jack to the school over that. A phone call would have served the purpose more efficiently. But we need to have this weird mini subplot thing between Jack and Lancer, so okay. Danny possesses Jack and goes to the school where he proceeds to act completely insane at Lancer. It's pretty good in terms of character because even though Danny is clearly in control of the situation, we still see his anxiety and unease about the whole event. As I know very few people who have actually been put into the position of controlling someone else's body in the effort of pretending to be them, I'm afraid I can't really talk on the logistics of how confident a teenager would be while trying to do it. However, if I were to wager, I would figure he would be pretty incredibly worried about it. Especially when you consider that not only is he putting himself into a position of potentially getting caught using ghost powers, he's using them for what I would say are fairly morally dubious means for the sake of avoiding getting in trouble. That's not to say that he just straight up turned evil, mind you. We have to keep in mind that we're still following the choices and thoughts of a 14-year-old boy. To think that Danny wouldn't use his newly discovered abilities to keep himself in the clear would make me raise an eyebrow more, honestly, especially after seeing how much he doesn't want to deal with telling his dad, who, by the way, is fishing without any bait and complaining that no ghosts are taking it. Just an interesting thing to note.
Why did the ghost bite that?
Did he have something like on the fishing rod that attracted the ghost dragon person?
Like bait? I mean, that's how you fish, right? Or a lure? I don't.
What would he have put on it that made the dragon decide to bite it?
I don't know.
I'm so frustrated, I want to take out my rage on the first person who gives me bad news.
Hold on, just saw that. That hook has nothing on it. He's literally throwing a hook, hoping to get out of this. The worst fisherman ever. Terrible.
So why did the dragon grab it the first time?
Because plot. Terrible.
Terrible.
However, just for fun, let's really briefly explore what possibly would have gone down if Danny would have allowed Jack to go to the conference without any interference from Danny. Let's say that Jack would have been a little irritated when Danny gave him the bad news, but I mean, it's not like he probably would have done anything. Danny has no control on when Lancer wants to call him to the school. The most likely scenario is that when Lancer told Jack that Danny's pants were randomly falling down, Jack, who was already in a fairly bad mood, probably would have reprimanded Danny to an extent and told him to wear the belt. And, I mean, unless I'm missing something, that probably would have been the end of it. Still, kids don't like getting in trouble. So, yeah, I don't really believe this is out of character for Danny in the slightest. Like I said, I even think it was handled fairly well in terms of how Danny handled the situation. He wasn't exactly the smoothest of pretenders. But let's move on to the actual issue this scene presents to us. After Danny flatters Lancer a couple of times, he invites Jack to the school dance to chaperone it. Well, that creates a bit of a problem. That could severely complicate things and make it really easy for Danny to lose his secret identity. Not only that, but then reveal that he used his ghost powers to try and get out of trouble. That could be bad. Good thing he has this other superpowered ability called saying no, right?
Chaperone? Well, I'm not sure.
I am. See you Friday.
What the hell, Danny?
Very easy way to get out of this. I'm busy that day. I can't go.
Yeah, literally, it's not, you can't just be, it's not, it doesn't just work like that. It's like, I'm inviting you to do this, and because I've invited you to do this, you're now inclined to do this, and if you don't do it, what are the consequences of not doing it? Just say no. Danny! Danny doesn't, he won't remember anyway!
Like, Danny, yeah. Like, seriously, you could even get a little bit more ballsy and say something along the lines of, well, yeah, that's my wife and my anniversary. I literally cannot. Sorry.
Yeah, it's pretty simple.
Yeah, it's not that hard, Danny. Come on.
So there's some artificial drama for you. Danny had absolutely no obligation to say yes to that. Not only are you risking your dad freaking out and assuming ghosts are wiping his memory or something stupid like that, you are risking Lancer finding out that it wasn't Jack that he spoke to at the conference. That could be bad. That could be very, very bad for you. It's not like it's that hard to get out of either. I'm busy that day. It doesn't take more than 2 seconds of brain activity to figure a way out of it. What are you even expecting to do? Tell your dad he agreed to it? What are you going to say when he says, I never spoke to Lancer? Might put a bit of a halt to whatever you have planned now, Danny. Of course, none of these things actually play into the episode at all. Jack seemingly doesn't question his loss of memory whatsoever beyond a single throwaway line. If I am to be incredibly generous, we can attribute it to Jack's stupidity, and really, in the end, we are attributing it to Jack's stupidity.
How did Danny actually get that across to them that he was going to be chaperoning the dance if he doesn't remember anything that happens when he's overshadowed?
We could easily just be like, so Dad, how about that dance thing you told me about? Dad, what now? I wasn't paying attention because I'm Jack Fenton, and then give him the little pamphlet thing, and he's like, oh yeah, this thing I remember totally, and then that's where we
I suppose, yeah.
His parents aren't bright.
But based on what we know of his personality, he would immediately assume that a ghost took control of him. The guy made a ghost dream catcher thing because he thought the cold he had was because of ghosts. The memory loss isn't at all suspicious to him, though. And because of that, the rest of the plot can happen unhindered. Anyway, we cut to the mall where we see Danny explaining his new power to Sam and Tucker. Sam makes a comment about the dance situation with his dad, and then Tucker says this.
Hey, Danny, if you could control a girl for just about 2 minutes.
That is literally so weird.
Get your own date for the dance.
That's
The very idea of that is straight out of a fucking hentai manga. That is so weird.
It's like not only that, it's like, Tucker, you do realize that they won't remember that they said yes, and so it'll just not matter once I leave, right?
It's so bad. It's so weird.
Tucker, stop being weird.
Yeah, as we said, that's a touch on the creepy side, Tucker. Also, it wouldn't work. So we see Paulina in some random clothing store when she sees a display of puffy yellow shirts. After searching through the pile, she calls an employee over to ask if they have any in her size. The employee quite literally tells her she's screwed and will be shunned by her friends and family for the entire duration that people care about this clothing line, and then this nonsense happens. Alright, let's go over this one. It sure is lucky for Paulina that this mall doesn't have security cameras that caught that. Because if that were a thing, we'd have to address the fact that people would have gone back to look at it to see what the hell happened. People would very much be aware that this girl transformed into a dragon. That certainly could have put Paulina in a weird spot. Especially in a universe where these morons exist, it wouldn't have been long before this chick just vanished off the face of the earth. Also, speaking of people who were aware of the fact that this girl transformed into a dragon.
So I guess none of these, this mall here doesn't actually have a camera that caught that or anything.
For anybody who just watched that happen, just doesn't give a shit later. They all live in the same town. Like, eventually you're going to see it. Like, wasn't that bitch turned into a dragon?
How big is this town? I mean, honestly, you see the same people in the crowds, like, fairly often. This can't be that huge of a city. I mean...
Even so, you're all going to go to the same places. You'll see people. It's just how it works.
Yeah.
I guess not a single soul who was in that mall at the time ever recognized Paulina again. Lucky. So everyone panics and runs away, and Danny decides to transform directly in the middle of the mall in front of everyone. Well, what are you doing, Danny? Do I need to repeat myself about the cameras? This mall absolutely has security cameras everywhere. I mean, sure, I guess we're staying consistent since nobody questioned this. But surely you have some level of desire to hide your abilities, Danny. Paulina had no control over what she was doing, but you do. And just the fact that there's something going on that's causing mass panic should strike a couple of those receptors in your brain to let you know people are going to go check the security footage later. You could have at least hid under the table or run to a restroom. Come on, man. You're about as secretive about your identity as Batwoman is. So Danny and the dragon fight for a minute, and Danny again sends it flying with his punches because I guess this thing only weighs about 13 pounds. The amulet flies off again and lands into a shopping bag that was abandoned by a terrifying shopper. The dragon transforms back into Paulina, where she finds the amulet and also this.
Hey! My fleecy tea! They must have had it in my size! I guess good things happen when you maintain a positive attitude.
So Paulina literally just stole.
Yeah, I know.
Like, that's
Sam's face right now is how I feel about this episode right now.
I know that it's like that can't have been the only thing in that bag, Paulina. Did you seriously just find that thing? Oh yeah, this must be mine.
Oh god, that's so dumb.
Oh man.
Also, Danny just flies back to his friends after this because I guess he just missed the dragon turning back into his date. Let me repeat that, because I don't think once is quite enough for something this stupid. Danny flies back to his friends because he lost track of the giant destructive dragon transforming back into the girl he gave the mysterious amulet to. Danny, what are you doing?
Did you not see her, Paul?
If you don't count me still being thick.
That's the thing. She just punched her away, and now it's like, oh well, I guess I'm done fighting her now. This is like, you didn't see her turn back into Paulina. Oh
nope.
Man. What the hell?
Anyway, now that that little emergency is over, we cut back to Tucker's woes of not being able to get a date. We're introduced to a new character, Valerie, who conveniently walks up right as Tucker is saying she's the last girl he hasn't asked out yet. Valerie is actually a pretty interesting character, and she's someone we'll be analyzing a bit more in depth later, but for now, she's simply another face in the crowd. A glorified extra, if you will. I don't know if they had it planned from the start to make her into what she turned into later in the series, or if they just picked a random person who had been referred to by name previously. But if they did the former, I applaud them at how subtly they introduced her to the audience. I mean, other than the fact that she just walked up to Tucker and started talking to him for no discernible reason when we immediately established that she doesn't like him. But so Tucker asks her out and she says no, shockingly, adding on that the only way she would say yes would be if something happened that took away her current date. This cues Quan to come on screen to tell Valerie about how he has a date with someone else, so he's not going with her anymore.
Quan's an asshole.
Also, why are you looking for dates? You already have one. Stop, Quan.
Quan is an asshole.
You just literally like, oh, raw, date rich now, raw.
So I found somebody prettier than you, so I'm going out with them instead. It's like, okay.
Yeah, that's, huh.
Also, did everybody just forget that there was a dragon that destroyed several windows, possibly lots of merchandise in other parts of the mall as well? Massive panic that was kind of thrown throughout the entire mall, and now everybody's just kind of walking around like nothing happened. Just something interesting to take note of.
We move on to the next scene, where we see Danny and his parents getting ready to go to the dance. We get the aforementioned throwaway line to explain Jack's knowledge of being the chaperone, and then this interaction happens between Jazz and Danny.
By the way, Danny, just so you know, I'm on to your little secret.
What? What secret?
The clumsiness, the nervousness. I can't believe I didn't figure it out before. You have a girlfriend.
It's a lie. I'm not a ghost. I mean, she's not my girlfriend. She's just going to the dance with me.
Just gonna ignore that?
I guess.
Most people will be like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Like, we don't even get like a scene of Jazz being like, oh great, the crazy's rubbing off onto you.
I think that would have actually been better.
Oh man.
I know it's a joke. However, the issue I'm going to detail isn't in relation to the joke itself. I actually thought it fit at least somewhat well with the overall tone of the show. Most of the jokes do, save for a couple glaring instances that we'll certainly be getting to. I also don't believe that this is something out of character for Danny to say, even though he apparently is okay with going ghost directly in the middle of a food court in a mall. But here's the thing. Jack and Maddie literally spent the whole last episode chasing Jazz around because she made one slightly out of character decision. It wasn't even out of character. They just jumped to the ghost conclusion because she hadn't ever offered to drive Danny to school in the past. Danny just got super defensive and shouted about how he's not a ghost with the same tone of voice you'd expect to hear from someone in a mental institution. And I guess Jack and Maddie just didn't notice it. Sure, yeah, they're idiots, but we can't use that excuse every single time they dismiss or completely ignore something. If the lunch lady floated up to Jack and screamed something about meatloaf at him before phasing through the wall and leaving, and he just waved it off saying cafeteria workers are crazy, then how are we ever meant to take Jack seriously at all? This comes down to where the line is between bumbling comic relief character and post-season 15 Homer Simpson. I wouldn't say that this joke crossed the line, but it started to get a little close to it, especially considering Maddie and Jazz don't even raise an eyebrow at it. Then again, I suppose that's consistent as well, considering what Maddie and Jazz just missed last episode. Why are you establishing that these characters are more intelligent and competent than Jack if you're just going to involve them in the same oblivious fool's gags? As I said, this joke probably would have been a lot more easy to shrug off had Jazz said something along the lines of, "Dear Lord, please don't let the crazy be rubbing off onto my brother," but they just ignore it. The conversation just moves right along unhindered. Just a little odd. We follow this scene with one that shows Danny and Tucker getting ready to leave for the dance. Danny takes the Fenton Fisher with him.
Why is he bringing the Fisher with him? Literally all he needs is the thermos. Like, that's the only invention he really needs for anything.
I know.
Like, Ghost is attacking? Oh, hold on. Fixed.
I don't know. He's got this like a Pokemon. He's got to weaken him first.
And we see Sam send an article that details the dragon and the amulet. Obviously, this is an exposition piece for Danny and the audience. The information that we learn is just enough for Danny to realize what's going on and what needs to be done to solve this episode's conflict. What's interesting to note about this is that the information is so readily available on the internet for anyone to see. This means, to an extent, that the legend is decently well known, and on top of that, there's a history to it. When the girl from the beginning of the show was alive, the amulet was apparently a possession of hers. This begs the question of how it ended up in the ghost zone with her after she died, and how it had its supernatural abilities prior to her death. Is the dragon another ghost entirely that's possessing the amulet and is only able to come out when the wearer is angry? Maybe. But that's never something that's said, so we can't say it objectively. And even if that were the case, it would raise even more questions, because that would then mean that dragons exist in this universe, which means that ghost dragons exist, which means why do we never see any other ghost dragons? But this is something I wish we could have learned more about, because it's very interesting and it has a lot of implications. If information like this can be grabbed with as little effort as going to page 2 on the Google search, then that means that surely other ghostly objects and curses are documented somewhere as well, right? This is some pretty big world building, and it's really a shame it's never built upon beyond being the exposition scene. In the last episode, the only piece of the ghost zone we saw was the lunch lady, and we're left to only theorize on her origins. Now we're being straight up told about a cursed object that was previously owned by a living person that then ended up in the ghost zone with said person. There are multiple episodes that you could build off of just that, and Danny wouldn't even need to be a part of them. So Danny concludes that he's made an error by giving Paulina the amulet, and Sam says this.
Like I said, looks are deceiving. I'm sure you boys will have a wonderful evening.
No, that's not what that means. It's literally the amulet. That's it. You're literally being a bitch again for no reason. You.
Yeah.
When you get the amulet later, and then Danny beats the shit out of you, gets the amulet off, and then he's just be like, "Oh wow, looks deceiving. Guess you're a bitch, Sam." That's what you were saying. Jesus Christ, dude.
Sam's pretty bad these first 2 episodes. Like, damn.
Yeah.
At least she gets better as the series progresses. So Danny finally realizes how much Sam wants to go to the dance and decides to possess Tucker to go and ask her out to it. So, yeah, this is going to take a minute because there are many layers of stupidity that I need to peel back on this one. To begin, what about Valerie? I know she's not really a character right now, but she did just lose her first date because her boyfriend's an asshole. Now she just lost her second one, rebound that she didn't actually care about, yes, but still, that's got to be a bit of a hit to the old self-esteem. And I guess she's just not going to the dance anymore. I know that teenagers care about that for some reason, so I have to say, way to be an asshole, Danny. You kind of screwed Valerie over, and she's not even trying to kill you yet.
What about Valerie?
Yeah, I know, right? I guess Valerie's just like, yeah, no.
Sucks to suck, idiot.
Sucks to be you, Valerie. Valerie just gets beat on this whole show.
Yeah.
Also, let's go over Danny's little plot here. He decides that the best course of action is to possess Tucker to make Sam think that Tucker is asking her out as a friend because Valerie stood him up. This is taking place immediately after Danny just told the two of them that he has a new ghost power that allows him to take control of other people's bodies and move them around like puppets. Not only this, but when Danny is possessing someone, they have his very distinctive voice and vividly green eyes. And guess what? You can't even use the excuse that Danny's voice is purely for the audience and he still sounds like Tucker to Sam, because this line exists.
Jack, you sound kind of strange.
Oh, must be something I ate.
So with all of this information that Sam possesses, you would think that she would immediately notice that Danny is overshadowing Tucker, right? Ha.
Is Sam not even the least bit, like, wondering why Tucker sounds like Danny right now?
Yeah, I think he sounds like Danny, so what the
Like, Tucker and Danny have 2 very distinct voices.
If you just walk up to me sounding like Nick, I'd be like, wait, what the fuck? It's pretty obvious. Jesus Christ.
On top of that, how exactly does Danny figure that Tucker isn't going to tell Sam that Danny possessed him and made him do it? Yes, that would probably hurt her feelings, but there's no guarantee that he wouldn't do it, especially since he yells at Danny that he's going to as he's flying off. If that happens, then congratulations to the both of you. You just made Sam feel worse for no reason. Thankfully, I guess Sam looks nice in her dress or something because Tucker decides to not say anything. His hormones dictated that he would be nice to her. It doesn't really detract from anything, I would say, but I think it would have been immensely better in terms of a character moment if Tucker would have started to say something only to notice how excited she was to go and deciding not to. It would have showed a level of compassion on Tucker's part and developed him more as a character, and he wouldn't just be going with her because girl pretty. As it stands, Tucker remains completely unchanged from beginning to end this episode, as was the case with the last episode, only he was a different character then. Last episode, he was insane meat-eater guy who never shuts up about it, and this episode, he was insane thirst guy who never shuts up about it. To be fair, I suppose we could conclude that he's at least not one-dimensional because of that. It's strange that we're focusing on one specific archetype in both episodes, but in the context of the story, it technically makes sense. Sort of. In this episode, it does, because he's trying to get a date for the dance. Last episode, he was just crazy meat guy even before he knew the menu was changed. Anyway, we cut back to Danny, where we see his brilliant and in-depth plan devising strategy for how he's going to get the amulet off of Paulina.
Paulina, about the amulet. It's an ancient family heirloom, and I need to get it back.
Just overshadow her and take it.
Yeah, it can't be that hard to actually get the amulet back. I mean, honestly.
Overshadow her, have her throw it somewhere where no one's going to find it, and then bring her back to the thing, and she'll be like, oh, the amulet's gone. Like, oh, no, I wonder we lost it. Oh, no. Oh, wow.
It's like, oh,
it's okay.
Yeah, don't feel bad, Paulina. I'll get you something better. Don't worry.
That's all it takes.
Why are you making things more complicated for yourself, Danny?
Danny literally just used his possession ability to get Sam a date to the dance. He used it as a way to keep himself from getting in trouble with his parents and his teacher. He has been taking complete advantage of this ability at every possible turn, until now when the plot hangs in the balance. It's always a wonderful time in storytelling when a character just forgets about a super powerful resource they have that would anticlimactically conclude the story. Allow me to devise your plan for you, Danny. This is just off the top of my head. Sam and Tucker are going to the dance. Possess Paulina when you get there and go give the amulet to one of them. Keep it somewhere hidden and safe from now on, or toss it back into the ghost zone when you get home. Roll credits.
Terrible idea.
This is... Man, Danny, you do not know how to handle these situations.
I mean, I guess he's 14, so he's working off pretty low abilities here. It's not like he's Spider-Man. He's not portrayed as being a really smart person.
He can figure out to overshadow Tucker, though, to get Sam to go to the dance. But he can't figure out to overshadow Paulina to take the...
I mean, true. Sometimes, though, if I had to explain it, sometimes kids can not see the easiest, simple solutions in front of them. However, plot, and also, it's still stupid.
I just even thought of it just now. It's like, overshadow Paulina, walk over to Sam and say, hey, Sam, I'm Danny. I took over Paulina's body. Here, take this.
It's that simple. Damn it. God damn it. Oh my god.
This problem is so easy to overcome. You don't need to convince Paulina of anything. Legitimately, the only reason you're not thinking about it is because the script needs you to not. Here's the thing about that. This is a problem that doesn't have to be ignored. There is a very easy way to fix this in the narrative so that it makes a little more sense, and I can't ask this question and make fun of it. Are you ready for this? Danny tries to possess her, but the amulet won't let him because ghostly woo-woo energy. Problem solved. He has to think of another way to get it off of her. Here, I'll even take this a step further. I know that we're limited to a short duration. 20 minutes, in fact. So we'll have to cut something out to make room for a scene like that. Worst case scenario, I would say that this scene would take about 10 to 15 seconds, as we would see Danny say something like, okay, here goes. Tries to jump into Paulina. The amulet starts glowing, and he's flung out of her, and when he lands, he makes a comment of, oh no, I can't overshadow her. 10 to 15 seconds, that sound fair? Cool. What 15 seconds can we cut out for a scene like that?
Doesn't this bring back memories?
If by memories you mean things you remember that I don't, then yes. Go ahead and remind me of stuff I'll totally agree to remembering.
Gee whiz, look at that. I removed something that added absolutely nothing to the narrative and made the episode make more sense. Funny old world. So next we cut to the
Princess costume ball.
It's a pretty standard looking high school dance from what I can tell. Overcrowded to the point of claustrophobia and extremely loud and annoying. We see Danny enacting his plan and it goes over about as well as you can imagine.
That amulet.
Isn't it fabulous? I haven't taken it off since you gave it to me.
That's not true.
No, about that. See, I shouldn't have given it to you in the first place because it belongs to Sam.
While this is going on, Lancer walks up to Jack and says,
About our conversation the other day concerning Danny.
So now Danny has to go overshadow Jack to keep that problem from sprouting. After this, Danny decides to make everything look even more weird by going up to Sam and Tucker while in Jack's body. He hands them 2 walkie-talkies, and I have no plausible clue on where the hell those came from or why Jack would have them on him, and tells Tucker to page him when Lancer gets close to Jack while telling Sam to help him find Paulina. Wait, so you mean to tell me you've already lost track of your date? The ticking time bomb that could turn into an evil dragon thing at any moment. This little dance thing is crowded enough for you to lose her after leaving her alone for less than 30 seconds, yet you instantly know where both your parents and Sam and Tucker are at any given time. Okay. Also, you didn't actually resolve whatever it was Lancer wanted to talk to Jack about. You just immediately abandoned the situation and ran away, so now you're just going to have to deal with this again when Lancer finds him a second time. Not that this is really the problem you should be worrying about right now, but if we're going to be, we should at least be efficient at it, right? Guess not. Of course, Sam finds Paulina immediately, and Danny says that he's on his way. Of course, he's just slow enough for Sam and Paulina to have a back and forth about him, which essentially goes as follows. Sam tries to get the amulet away from Paulina. Paulina makes a comment about how she's keeping it and Sam's boyfriend, even though she still should have no reason to think that her and Danny are dating. Sam says that Danny isn't her boyfriend and apologizes for calling her shallow because we need that narrative moment to let the audience know that Sam isn't a bad. Paulina says that she only agreed to go out with him because she thought she was stealing him from Sam. And then she attaches the necklace to Sam, who does nothing to take it off before saying she's going to go dump Danny. Then Sam turns into the dragon. Sure did take you a long-ass time to get to that bathroom, Danny. Also, I guess that music is so loud that nobody heard the gigantic monster destroying the ceiling in the bathroom. I guess nobody ever noticed it at all, honestly, because it never comes up again. How about that? Danny kicks the dragon down because existent yet never acknowledged super strength and tries to calm her down, only to see that Paulina is in its claws, and we get a convenient line to let him know that the dragon is actually Sam.
Well, I guess looks are deceiving, aren't they, Sam?
Ow! Also, exposition dragon.
And then this nonsense happens.
What the hell was that? What is the geography of this place?
I have no idea.
Like, you caught that, right? The fact that Danny grabbed Paulina and then flew out, and then all of a sudden Sam was in front of them again?
So, yeah. That doesn't make any goddamn sense. Danny is flung into a fence where the dragon lifts the entire audience stand and throws it away to get to them. Things are looking bleak and hopeless when a terrifying call from Tucker makes it all 10 times worse.
Danny, Lancer's getting close to your dad.
Oh, well, I guess.
But something that doesn't matter is literally it's like something else that has no real, that it doesn't actually matter is happening. I timed it all of a sudden. Priorities, man. Please. Please.
No, it's more important that the Danny's parents don't talk to Lancer than Paulina's life.
So that's avoided, and Danny goes back and fights Sam some more. He takes the Fenton Fisher out, which I don't know why he didn't do that earlier. Could have made this a whole hell of a lot easier. Or, there's another option that's pretty reliable. Probably even more so considering the danger this thing actually poses to everyone. Why aren't you just using the thermos, Danny? Incapacitate this thing so it can't hurt anyone. You can take the amulet off Sam when the threat is neutralized. I don't know if the thermos would actually suck Sam into it or if it would only take the amulet, but regardless, it's better than letting the dragon run amok, putting everyone's lives in danger. What are you doing, Danny? So Danny wraps the dragon up with the fishing line and takes the amulet off of her, and it transforms back into Sam. Also, I guess just nobody saw that fight going on between the dragon and Danny. Now, everybody's inside of the dance. Not a single soul was outside other than Dash and this other random person, but that never goes anywhere. This entire fight, for the most part, goes entirely unnoticed, which is, man, isn't that convenient?
Wow. Did I have fun at the dance?
Well, let's just say you had a roaring time.
The episode ends with relationship teasing between Danny and Sam. This is something we're going to have to deal with throughout the entire series, so get used to it. I'm not going to talk about it right now, but trust me, we're going to have multiple opportunities to do so. Many opportunities to do so. We see Tucker yelling and complaining about how he doesn't have a date anymore. Rightfully so, mind you, because Danny kind of screwed him out of 2 in the same night. Then the dragon girl from the beginning of the episode shows up. It's kind of weird that she just showed up, but as I said earlier, it's entirely possible that she's just looking for the amulet. Considering ghosts can just leave through the portal whenever they feel like it would seem, I think it can be inferred that she just found her way here. It's stupidly convenient that she found the place that it's at, and I'm really rather wondering what the conversation was that followed. Did they just give her the amulet back? Did they say something about possibly trying to control her temper so she didn't come back and wreak havoc across their fair city? Maybe just don't wear the amulet anymore because it does that, and that's pretty dangerous in terms of living your life. Or afterlife, for that matter. But remember
that none of the ghosts would be dead people.
Interesting stuff like that, I guess we just don't get to see. But fine, whatever, I suppose. The episode is over, so let's recap.
This is the implication here, is that the only people that are actually attracted to Tucker are dead people.
Huh.
Oh, yeah, so how do you think how would we rate that one?
It's just there's so much wrong with it.
That one,
that's like a 4 out of 10. Jesus Christ.
I think
there were so many problems.
Yeah.
With Danny's decision making and the way that amulet works, it just seems like it's really easy to deal with. And it's also Sam being a massive bitch so often. God damn, that was rough. That was rough.
That was easily worse than the first episode. That was ooh.
Yeah. Without a doubt.
In terms of characters, we did expand upon a couple things. Tucker, while showing not that much character growth, at least he isn't a completely flat character who only cares about meat anymore. The transition in which they made him this is a bit strange because he flips to this entirely different archetype and meat never even comes up again when it's shown that it's a stupidly, overly important piece of character for him. But at the same time, nothing was done that contradicted his love for meat, so therefore I can't say that it was entirely poorly executed. Simply a bit clunky. Unlike Tucker, Sam actually did have zero growth whatsoever, and from what I can tell, the writers didn't really even know what they wanted to do with her at this point beyond being a love interest to Danny. While the veganism thing wasn't pushed to the point of lunacy, she was still basically the same character she was in the previous episode. She acts entirely by emotional impulses, in the case of this episode, jealousy, and the show treats her as if she's in the right and Danny's in the wrong, while Paulina has done nothing beyond existing at this point. There's definitely a hint of something as we see her beating around the bush with her friends that she actually wants to go to the dance, but not really, which I would say is a step in the right direction. There's some depth, it's there, we just have to dig it up. Yeah, that doesn't sound quite right. I don't care, I'm leaving it anyway, I'm sure you know what I mean. Paulina... Ooh boy. Oh, where do I start with Paulina? Ignoring the fact that it sure was lucky that Sam was right about her all along, Paulina has the character depth of a... Well, honestly, Sam puts it fairly well.
If you mean, do I think I could stand in a puddle full of you and not get my feet wet? Then yeah.
After seeing this episode, I can honestly say I know nothing about Paulina other than she's the bitchy mean girl archetype who's popular and likes ugly as hell yellow t-shirts. I guess by its very definition, that means she's not one-dimensional, but damn, what a lame character. I know that's kind of the point, and fair enough, But it's not like Paulina is a one-off character who never shows up again. She's a regular throughout the entire show. And don't get me wrong, she technically does grow. You know what that growth is? She develops a crush on Ghost version of Danny. That's it. That's the secondary love interest the show's giving us. She's reduced to a joke 90% of the time because there's literally nothing else to her character. So if I am to hold her to the same standard that I'm holding Sam and Tucker to, then she is a significantly poorly written character. Lancer is still one-dimensional teacher guy. Jack is still one-dimensional ghost hunter guy. Maddie still doesn't have any character traits. I don't know what they were trying to do with Jazz. She's still one-dimensional as hell. And Danny... Danny's a weird case. Obviously, the main point of character development we're getting with Danny is his new ghost power. We're being shown that he's eventually going to be developing new abilities over time, and that's pretty huge in terms of shaking up the narrative. His personality, however, is still pretty... flat. As was the case with Mystery Meat, Danny's personality comes second to Sam and Tucker, which is kind of weird considering he's the main character. In the first episode, he was upset because he didn't want to be half ghost. This entire part of the story, as we remember, played second to the meat/vegan idiocy. In this episode, Danny's intentions and desires are certainly more the forefront of the focus, and we see more of who he is as a person. But right now, all that is I want to go on a date with Paulina. Which is fair enough. There's a dance happening, and that's what he would probably primarily be worried about. But for being the title character, I can say less about him right now than I can Sam and Tucker, which is really weird. The story, as we detailed, has a lot of problems with it. Dare I say, even more so than Mystery Meat did. At least in that one, we're left with the fact that most of it just came down to Sam and Tucker being bitter at each other. But here we're straight up pulling a Quiet Place waterfall move and just ignoring the solution that would have instantly solved all the problems of the episode. That's pretty rough. That's really rough. We got some interesting hints at world building with the amulet, and we're doing a decent job at building the mystery of what's actually going on inside the ghost zone. There's a couple cookie crumbs of intrigue that have been sprinkled around the story, and it's definitely setting the stage for what could probably be some pretty awesome stories. We shall see, though, won't we? We shall definitely see. And, yeah, that about does it for parental bonding. We've finished covering episode 2, and we have quite the ride yet to get through. I look forward to tackling it with you once again next week. So until then, I bid you farewell, and I'll see you next Saturday.
Mr. Fenton, about our conversation the other day concerning Danny.
I guess Jack just didn't answer Lancer there. He just stood there and stared at him like that.
Also, Maddie's right there too. She can also say things.